Well, that's it. The issue of oil theft has been a major concern for Nigerians. As we see, the country has not been able to meet up with its quota. In fact, for August, the country could not even produce up to 1 million barrels a day, which used to be taken for granted before now. But it's an ongoing conversation, and we'll certainly follow up on that. For now, let's see what else apart from oil is going on in the commodity space. And joining us to have that conversation is Adesola Somoni, all the way from Reading in the United Kingdom. He's an analyst with Financial Derivatives Company. Hi, Adesola. Good morning.
Hi, Ini. Good morning. Thank you for having me on the show today.
Good to have you. So it's the day after the Queen's burial. How much participation did you do, Adesola? Did you just sit at home? Were you part of those on the queue that we saw?
Thank you for that question, Ini. I participated at home. I watched the whole ceremony from home, but on Friday I was in London to kind of like pay my respects to the Queen. But I did not join the queue, and there's a lot of warnings that if you do not have to be in London, please don't go, because there was massive pressure on the transport infrastructure. A lot of trains were cancelled or delayed. Even within London, to get from one point to the other, it was mostly faster to walk than to take the train or the buses. So there was a lot of disruption of economic activity, both in London and the environs, because of the whole world, was coming to London to pay their respects to the Queen.
I do know that if it was in Nigeria, a lot of small businesses, retailers would have taken advantage of it. So you would have a lot of people on the road, selling munchies, and things like that. Did you have that?
Indeed. So I would say that first, there was a bank holiday yesterday, as for the Queen's funeral. But I would say that this, and a lot of economists in the UK will also tell you the same thing, that this the morning period as well as the bank holiday kind of slowed down economic activity in England. Some estimates are like there are some estimates that show that it has further increased the risk of recession. But also there are some gainers, like you mentioned, there are florists, flower sellers in London, coffee sellers in London, the hospitality sector in London also gained from the flock of people in and around London to pay their respects to the Queen. However, there was also sharp reduction in other areas. Many shops, many stores were closed. Many businesses were closed. Even some hospitals were closed because of paying their respects to the Queen. And some economists have said that this increases the risk of recession. Already in the UK, the economy was weak already going into Q3. We have inflation at record levels at the 40-year high. We have the cost of living crisis. We have energy prices also at record high. So the economy was weak already. And then adding this unexpected bank holiday and the morning period, I think that's further weakened the economy.
Yeah, but I mean, as you mentioned, it's a win on one side and well, not so win on the other side because of the bank holiday. But as you noted, a lot of hotels and hospitality, edibles, eateries, for those who stayed open, I think they smiled home yesterday because, I mean, and you still have them. Everything hasn't gone back to normal. You still have a lot of visitors back there. And these people would need to do transportation. They would need to feed. They have children. They will buy gifts back home. So I guess it's not altogether gloomy.
I mean, yeah, like you mentioned, the gains were kind of concentrated in and around the London area, right? So shops in London, taxi drivers in London, they made a killing over this weekend, right? But all around the country, in other parts of the country, I mean, even many malls were closed yesterday to pay their respects to the Queen. Even McDonald's was closed yesterday, to honor the Queen. Tesco's, the huge, grocery chain stores, all of them were closed yesterday as a form of paying respects to the Queen. But in London, the pubs in London, the hotels in London, the florists in London, the cab drivers in London, they all made a killing yesterday. Over the weekend, actually, over this weekend.
What about the parks? I learned some parks closed.
Some parks. Oh, yeah, some parks were also closed. But those in London, I mean, Hyde Park in London kind of streamed streamed the bearer. So there's a lot of people in Hyde Park and some of the huge parks in London. But outside of London, outside in the southeast area and other regions of the UK, I mean, all of them were closed to pay their respects. But some huge parks opened just to stream the burial. I mean, some were open in Edinburgh, in some parts of London, and some parts of Scotland as well.
So what's the situation this morning? The morning is still hanging in the air. Are businesses opening up? Trains, are they back? Some flights were cancelled. What's going on this morning?
I think things are gradually moving to normal. A lot of today, a lot of world leaders are traveling back to their country. So there will still be a lot of activity today, but things are gradually moving to normal. Like you said, there was a lot of flights were cancelled over the weekend, Saturday, Sunday, even yesterday. I had a friend who was in London from DC. His flight was delayed significantly by over like 5 hours. And that happened to quite a lot of people. But I think by today, things are moving back to normal. As you know, school resumed today. My daughter is in school. I have work today. My wife has work today. Everyone is going back to work today. So yes,
Adesola, you should have been in London. You would have helped us to take a picture with the vice president.
Indeed. I mean, yeah, should have. Well, yeah, just rather escape the madness.
All right, so oil prices are down. The dollar is gaining just on the assumption or expectation that the Federal Reserve is going to hike rates again. And then we already see commodities reacting adversely to it. It doesn't look like there's an end to this.
Indeed, Ine, like you mentioned, the U.S. Reserve, they're expected to meet this week, and the expectations is that they're going to hike interest rates by 75 basis points, which while it may help to rein in inflation, which is at record levels, it also has the tendency to kind of precipitate a recession, right? So what's happening is that there are concerns that an imminent recession would also impact a lot of commodities, right? And there's concerns on that and also the expectations of an interest rate hike, particularly in the US, and many other central banks are going to follow suit in the coming weeks. Those expectations are kind of strengthening the US dollars. Like you mentioned, we've seen the US dollar strengthen against a basket of currencies, which is kind of making oil, which is denominated in US dollar, to be more expensive to holders of these other currencies. So those are the two main factors that's affecting oil price on the demand side. On the supply side, we see OPEC. You mentioned this, Amy, that OPEC Plus is really, really struggling to meet its production quota. We see for July, the output gap for OPEC Plus was around 2.8 million barrels per day. For August, it was around 3.5 million barrels per day. And Nigeria is one of the countries who is struggling to meet its production quotas. Like you mentioned, issues like pipeline vandalization and just siphoning, stealing oil on the side are the factors that are making Nigeria not to meet its production quota and also not to benefit from the oil price boom.
Yeah, that issue of oil theft is a major one for us in Nigeria. We've been on that issue, and we do hope that they find a way around it. But when you talked about the dollar gaining value because of the expectation, not even that they've made the announcement yet. And we have our MPC next week. And of course, the expectation, we've seen the inflation 20.52, food inflation also surging more than 20%, about 23 plus. So I think the expectation is that the MPC is going to increase interest rate. But do we see it translate to added value in the Naira, like it's happening in the Federal Reserve? I'm wondering why.
I think for Nigeria, it's the transmission mechanism, right? The transmission from the policy decision and the policy instrument to the market. In the US, in developed countries, the transmission mechanism is quite smooth because they have well-developed financial systems. But in Nigeria, financial system is not super developed. But in addition to that, many of the drivers of inflation in Nigeria are not monetary factors, right? They are usually like structural factors, things like security issues, logistics problem, things like that. So in terms of strengthening the naira by increasing our interest rate, the idea is that when you increase interest rates, it makes the cost of buying uh, uh buying foreign currency higher, and as a result, people buy less, which kind of strengthens the naira, right? But in Nigeria, there are additional factors that that are driving the value of the exchange rate. We know on the supply side of US dollars, we know that the oil proceeds from selling oil is one of the biggest supply of US dollars into the country. We also have foreign portfolio investment, but in recent times, both foreign portfolio investments have kind of dried up because of the conditions, the economic conditions of the countries of the country. Investors are kind of taking tentative positions on Nigeria. But for the oil, as we are earning effects from selling oil, we are also kind of spending it to import refined petroleum products. In addition to that, there's huge demand there's this backlog of FX from manufacturers or from foreign companies that have operations in Nigeria. For instance, recently we saw how some airline companies, decided to pull out of Nigeria because they are unable to repatriate their profits back to their home country. This is also part of due to the dollar shortage and dollar challenges that Nigeria faces. In addition to that, we are seeing a huge migration of students, of people, seeking uh, greener pastures or academics going to school abroad essentially. And because of that, there's huge demand of US dollars in the country. So those are some of the factors that are driving the exchange rate and making the monetary policy, making the effect of the monetary policy kind of weak at this time.
Mm. And then we see the price of liquefied natural gas surging. Is this about Russia turning off its gas to Europe?
Essentially, yes. Essentially, like before the pandemic, no, not before the war, Russia accounts for around 40% of the gas supplies in the EU. And suddenly, because of the war and because of sanctions, EU countries are trying to win themselves of Russian oil, and it's not going to happen overnight, right? So they're trying to that there's this what's it called now, a phased reduction or they're trying to reduce their reliance on Russian gas, and they're trying to look for other exporters like the US. But the US currently is exporting at capacity, but it is still not enough to meet up it's not enough to meet up with the demand coming from EU. We're also seeing the EU approach some GCC countries like some Gulf countries to kind of secure some LNG. But what happened is many of these countries have already many of these countries have already sold their gas even before they extracted it. So there's this huge gap, right? And that's part of why the gas prices are at record levels. Now, in addition to all of this, recently, like you mentioned, Russia closed or halted production at one of its main distribution points or export points to Europe via Germany. That is the Nord Stream. So that has further complicated the issues. Now, in addition to all of this, there's rumors that traders are kind of like hoarding LNG at sea in anticipation of a price hike in Europe in the coming months. So all of these factors are coming in. And if we have a colder than expected winter, I think it's going to be really, really bad for many European countries.
Yeah, and then on top of it, as you said, Nigeria is just taking off its Nigeria-Morocco pipeline, gas pipeline. I wish we had done that years before now. Then perhaps Nigeria would have been able to supply to calm the nerves and all the needs, But I mean, we're just starting now, and we don't even have a timeline on when we'll finish. But what else is happening in the commodity space?
So in the commodity space, we have the price of palm oil increase marginally, really, because of Indonesia, which is the biggest exporter of palm oil, have kind of lifted up a ban on palm oil exports. And we're seeing huge demand coming from India, in which is also the largest importer of edible oils, of vegetable oils. And we are seeing huge demand coming from India in anticipation of the Diwali festival, which is coming up, I think, in October. So that's really why we are seeing the price of palm oil increase marginally. And I think this is quite important because for Nigeria is quite a net importer of palm oil. As of last year, Nigeria imported around 600,000 net. So sorry, there's a net deficit of around 600,000 metric tons. That is Nigeria. That's the mismatch between Nigeria's production and Nigeria's demand. And because of palm oil is also used for many products in Nigeria. If you look at the likes of Okomo oil, as the price of palm oil is going up, it's also going to affect their businesses. So I think that's quite significant for Nigeria. In addition to that, we are seeing the price of cocoa. Cocoa is kind of like trending downwards, but it should be trending upwards, because we are seeing in Cote d'Ivoire, we are seeing excessive rainfall, particularly in the cocoa growing regions in Cote d'Ivoire. I think this is quite important because excessive rainfall kind of affects the harvest, and it also creates excessive moisture in the excessive soil moisture, which kind of breeds this black pod disease. And all of these are going to affect the harvest and would affect the prices, would increase the prices going forward. So I think those are the factors, those are the key trends in the global commodity market.
All right, just the last morning. Thank you so much. And it's harvest time here in Nigeria, so I guess we should expect prices to taper a bit, even though I don't see that. But thank you so much for your time, and do take care of yourself over there in Reading. All right, so we'll talk more about the issue of increase in prices, especially food prices, inflation, and as we take a look at the state of Nigeria's economy in just a moment. This is Business Morning on Channels Television.